Welcome to Change Itself. Change is all around us every day. Change can create a masterpiece or chaos, and everything in between. Your hosts, Gus Miner and Eric Demers, along with special guests, walk us through the ups, downs, collaborations, debates, and fun that come every step of the way. The show is brought to you by Sophie and Technical Mining and is produced by Crownsman Partners. Now, here are your hosts, Gus and Eric.
Welcome, everybody, to episode number 1 of Change Itself. We're pretty excited to have you on board with us on our journey, and I hope you find the content valuable. I'm Gus Miner, and I'm coming in here live with Eric Demers, and we look forward to sharing a lot of conversations around change, technology, just overall work habits, work culture, things that we've kind of experienced through our careers, and hopefully engage you guys with the conversation, and hopefully you guys take the time to offer a lot of comments below, so we can expand on that conversation on future episodes as we go along. So welcome on, Eric. Here we go. We're finally here, episode number 1.
Right on. Thanks, Gus. Exciting. I mean, we've been having these conversations. We have these conversations weekly, and it's fun to get to share them with other people.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the things that we talked about all the time, is we always have these box meetings for half an hour or 45 minutes or an hour, and then we sometimes get carried away with the conversations because they're just so enlightening, right? And there's just so much that we get out of it as far as how we tackle our day to day and how we can share what we kind of workshop with others to see things through. So it'll be challenging at times, I'm sure, to keep it within the time spec that we've had for the show. But that's what makes it interesting as well, so that we keep everybody entertained as much as we can, right? And hopefully everybody that's tuning in enjoys the conversations that we have.
I hope we get to build off of some of those conversations. Like, they're fun to have, you and I, but like other people's perspective in on it to build, I think definitely will help this conversation.
Absolutely. So Eric, maybe I'll leave it to you. Maybe you can explain a little bit more as far as why we decided to do this. What's our goal? What do we want the audience to know?
Well, I think you touched on it earlier. Definitely about change, technology, what's coming, what we're seeing. Participate in a lot of different demos and different technologies out there. Different things, even in the space of human behavior, that I find really interesting. We have some really interesting conversations on, whether it's management practice or just habits in general, just really everything and anything, wherever it goes.
Yeah, right on. And I mean, to echo that, I mean, for me, sometimes what happens is I've worked with so many groups now that everybody thinks that their groups are challenging or being challenged in a way that's very specific to them. And in reality, when you come in as an outsider, you realize, every group is coming in at this with the exact same challenges, the exact same people. People are people. The technology is the technology. The workplaces are the workplaces. Yeah, there's caveats based on where you are and how things are happening based on their leadership models. But ultimately, everybody's challenged with the same things. So, I really hope that we're able to at least help some people understand a little bit further where they are in their journey, what could happen, and obviously get as much feedback as we can from others to help us possibly on our journeys. I mean, it's all about learning, right?
Yeah. For me, I've realized that little change adverse sometimes, I don't like it, but after, settle in on it, think about it, reflect on it, question everything, question the change itself, no pun intended. And, I get around to it and I'm on board, but yeah, I've found myself to be one of those people that tends to be hesitant when it comes to change.
Yeah, for sure. And what's funny is that every day, I can't think of any day that I'm not faced with some kind of change, either on my personal life or my professional life or whichever aspect that we're exposed to as soon as we wake up in the morning. But when you really think about it, we change a lot on a daily basis. So whether it's the route that you take to go to work, whether it's even if you do end up going to work because you end up doing a Zoom call or a Teams call, however it may be. So we have all this change that happens around us all the time. Construction is happening here. There's moving parts in our lives all the time. And I've always been curious as to why it's so challenging to actually entertain some of the changes at work or within our work groups when, as human beings, we're just exposed to it so much. So why do you think that it's such a hold point for us when we get to work and we try to work with our work groups and make those shifts or have those changes take place? Like, what's our big barrier? What's happening there?
I don't know. I think it's something about, looking bad or looking good, if you will. Like, I have a plan and I feel like I'm in control. And if it happens that way, I can control what's going on. And when I'm at home, like I, won't think about it. Fish aren't biting. I try something else. It's just a thing. But at work, it's like, no, I got a set plan. It's got to be a certain way. And when it's not, it triggers me.
Right. I wonder if it has a lot to do with even like just the fact that people are depending on you. Right. So yes, at home, people are depending on you, but you're a lot more agile in that sense, because theoretically you're all in it together. You just kind of do your thing, and then there's less of an impact. But maybe the angle of it is that, being that you're going to work to provide for your family, and this is what this is what you've defined for yourself as success for the day. And then all of a sudden you show up and then the success metric changes, or the ball has shifted, and now you're not 100% sure how you're going to be successful in this new format or with the new directive. And possibly in your subconscious, you're also concerned about everyone else behind you that's actually depending on you to perform in a certain way. And maybe that's what the biggest impact is, right? I mean, that's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think from some of my previous experience and some self-development courses, I think for me and for others that I've seen, it's something around a fear of failure, where you're like you said, like people are depending on you. You're afraid you might let them down, or it's not going to me, it's out of my control. It's out of people's control. And if it's out of your control, then how do you know it's going to happen? You made a commitment to someone, you made a promise, like got to make that happen. So it's about reliability.
Right. It's funny because one of the things that I was thinking about that as we're getting prepared for the show, and then you said, what, we've been connected together for quite a few years now, and it's all been through various formats. It's never been, this is the Eric and Gus journey, so to speak, but we always kind of seem to gravitate back to working together, which has been really exciting and interesting along the way, because we've changed roles so many times within the companies we're working with whether or the industry. And through all those changes, like, what do you think has been connecting us together so much? And is it just because of the way we are and how we're driving things, or is it there's a natural force that's keeping us together to keep the ball moving forward?
I think we both, from like our conversations, we both question things. We both like to have these strange conversations and explore them. We don't necessarily accept the status quo. And I mean, we don't always agree, but when we do disagree, we tend to come back, a day or two later, and we have a conversation about it, and we see each other's perspectives, and things just work out. I mean, it's part of what it is, but I think it's that openness and that being able to see somebody else's perspective and take that perspective. Like, I really enjoy your perspective on a lot of things. You bring just a different, experience to the table. It's something that I can, I can grow from. And that's what, I think brings us back and forth. Like, I have a certain perspective, you have a perspective. I think they work very well together.
Yeah, I think, I can echo that for sure. When I was looking at the experiences that we've had, right from like working together from a coordination standpoint to one project I was actually working for you were my supervisor, and we're working on things. And then we start looking at, well, why is this work being performed this way? And then let's just take a look at the prints and try to do it ourselves. And sometimes it worked out and sometimes it didn't. I remember a very specific rebar mat that we challenged, and it was, I thought we did pretty good, but anyways, I had to get corrected a little bit. But when I look at our journey, it's been really interesting as far as the different capacities that we work together and the different roles that we've had to fulfill to get to where we need to be, and then how we collaborated on different mature projects, new projects. We've kind of entertained a lot of things that we've never done before. And most recently now, I mean, we're diving into this technology where on my side, I mean, I'm tasked to lead a team and build a product that's that's going to be sustainable and create sustainability for organizations, and then you rolling it out and seeing that change firsthand, not only from a performance standpoint, but just how technology is actually increasing the amount of questions coming from the field, which has been really interesting. Is that our curious minds are now starting to create more curiosity, I find. And it's been fun. I mean, a lot of the conversations that I've been having with a lot of individuals that have been touched with some of the projects that we've undercome and are now asking questions that I never ever would have imagined that they would have asked, 5 years ago or 6 years ago. So it's been fun.
Yeah. What kind of questions are you getting?
Well, just, I mean, we went from a world where we were told we were crazy for the most part. Like, we were told that we were being kind of foolish introducing uh home electronics or consumer based electronics in the mine site and put it in that harsh environment, and it's worked out perfectly fine. And then we go from this is impossible to wait, this is possible. And now the questions are, hey, well, now that we're doing all of this, do you think that this is possible? And some of the questions are completely they're huge ideas, and it would take us probably 10 years or 5 years to develop them and put them in play. But never would that have been like, one of the questions was, in a sense where we can use like Alexa and things like that in our home environments, and being able to use it. And even in some workplaces have them, but being able to kind of reference job procedures or reference
Drawings?
policies or prints, and just call it out by name, and then all of a sudden you've got it in your hand, kind of thing. Like a marriage between what's in your hand, which was what is verbally acknowledgeable, and things like that. Really cool ideas as far as like how to manage data and how to manage the library to make it even that much more efficient. I mean, we're probably giving away some of the ideas that are coming through our way, but I mean, it's interesting to entertain a lot of the concepts and solutions that are coming directly from the field to solve some key problems, where 3 to 5 years ago, it wasn't even close to that type of a conversation. But the conversation of even just giving a phone or a tablet to do work was just a ludicrous kind of idea, right?
Yeah, I remember like people like, oh, I don't want the tablet, I just want the desktop. Now it's quite the opposite. I just want the tablet. How do we get everything on this tablet? Like, I just want one device,
right,
connected to the hip. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And we can see it everywhere as well. Like, even when it comes to like managing workplaces, storages, equipment, it's almost like it unlocks some creativity as well, where to say like, hey, if we found efficiencies this way, I wonder if we can find efficiencies this way if we really dive into it and realize, why are we doing it this way to start off with, and what is the possibility of making small incremental change to go into a different place with what we're doing, so that we can get more efficient, more productive. I mean, I've said it before. At the end of the day, I mean, I don't really. It doesn't really matter who's coming into work. They're coming into work to be productive and be proud of their day, and of course to provide for their family. So it's not a shock for me anymore to see that people are asking for a lot of things rather than waiting for people to dictate those things to them. Now they're actually asking for those things and wanting more, because they can see the clear path. They can see how just questioning how things are done, or questioning if what is so today is what needs to be so tomorrow, right? And it's been interesting.
One of the challenges that I've seen, and we talked about it earlier this week, but was around just some of the technology, and like, it's really cool, but it's just not quite helpful for us, especially underground where there's low connectivity. Like, it's really interesting. Like, I love where we're going, but it's just like, in order for me to take that on, like, I got to create a new role, add some more work. Like, there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes. What are your, what are you seeing around that?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to some of the basic stuff where, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And
Yeah.
and I think that for the most part, the workforce is asking those questions as well. And people that you're trying to implement change with, they're also saying like, yeah, I got it. I can see where you're going with this. But do we need to do this? And I think for that perspective, that's where the messaging needs to be, very, very clear as to um, being able to kind of explain why you're doing something, and what the core fundamental reason is to move forward in this path. Because it might not be something that pays dividend today. Maybe what you're doing today, as far as your first change initiative, is not something that's actually going to benefit you today. However, 1 year from now or 2 years from now, as you compound all these small changes, now the long game kicks in, and you really see where you've gone. And we've actually seen that firsthand as well, where you do incremental change, and then eventually it becomes a pretty major change.
One of the strategies that I'm taking now and talking with some of the other managers is like, oh, I really want this outcome, but it's like, okay, that outcome adds work to the worker or the supervisor or the superintendent or the project manager for that matter. So like, how can we adapt this to something they're already doing to satisfy your needs based off what they're already doing? Whether it's no extra work for them, nothing changes in their world, everything stays the same, yet you're getting the result you need. That's how I'm looking at technology now. Like, how do I adapt, use what are we already doing that I can leverage to like get that end result of what we're looking for? I find that gets more engagement than just adding on, layer another piece, another rule, another, I find that's not helpful at times.
Right. And I mean, that's the exciting part about what we're doing with the show as well. I mean, we've got quite a few shows scheduled now. We're going to be releasing an episode every month. That's what we've committed to. Yep. And we've got some really exciting guests lined up where we'll have numerous perspectives coming our way, and a lot of information that we'll be able to learn from. And I'm pretty excited about the people that we're going to have on board as far as experts in their respective domains, and putting all that information together. I think it's going to be something that not only we're going to benefit you and I, but that our audience will really enjoy as well, especially when they tune in, whenever they tune into our episodes.
I hope you're enjoying the show. We will be right back after a quick shout out to our sponsors. Every worker deserves to go home safely at the end of the day. Book a demo with Sophie to discover how their groundbreaking EHS management software empowers workers to proactively avoid hazards, and how organizations like yours can cultivate a stronger work culture. Visit sophie.com. Technica Mining is a premier underground mining and construction contractor. They stand for delivering quality project work on time and on budget through innovative thinking. Their excellent safety record, experienced workforce, and large equipment fleet will guarantee the time completion of all your project needs. Trusted by the world's leading mining companies, Technica Mining has over 20 years of experience in mine construction, development, and production. Contact Technica Mining to take your next mining project to the next level. Visit technicamining.com. Change Itself is produced by Crownsman, the voice of industry. You can check out more, including The Crownsman Show, Mining Now, and Crownsman Energy at crownsman.com. Now let's get back to the show with Gus and Eric on Change Itself.
It's funny because one of the things that we talked about in the past, and it actually came up within my team recently, was there's a very funny phenomenon when it comes to the individual, is if they leave their workplace or they leave their job to go work somewhere else because the grass is greener or whatever the case may be, and then they go work there, they could be doing the exact same job or hold the exact same role that they held before. But now they go into this new place and they're told, this is how we do it here. And then they just absorb that and then shift how they're doing things, and that's how they do it. Or if they go from, even within the same organization, if they go from one role to the next, they're like, okay, well, that's how I did it in this role. Now I'm into this role. This is how I'm doing things now in this role. And I just have to adapt to it because that's what's required of me. And there's no problem. Like the shift just occurs.
How can you create that kind of artificially, if you will? Like, because like we've seen it with like, even if I use the technology we're working with now, we're trying to get people to acknowledge documents through Sophie, through the app, and what their people tend to keep wanting to revert back to their email, because that's just where they're used to doing things. And it was like people that are coming in new to role or new to the organization, they've never done it any other way. That's just how they do it. But where your pattern is to look at your email, man, that's a tough one to break. So like you said, maybe it's like creating like that, artificial new role just to like shift it. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about it quite a few times where it's like, if nothing changes except for what's required of you, there's a big whole point.
Yeah.
But then if what's required of you because you've changed into a different role, now it's not a big deal because you're just adapting to your new role, even though you might be doing the exact same task. So that was one of the things that's been really intriguing me lately. And to your point, it's what do we put in place? Like, do we just rename the roles and just say now this role is no longer there and this is the new role and this would exist? But that comes with its challenges as well, especially when it comes to, human resources regulations and just the overall like labor laws that come in play with that, because you don't want to have anybody just say, well, you just changed my world overnight and then now I have to comply or get out. That doesn't work. But it's been something that's always been in the back of my mind where it says, if I walk in and this is just the way it is, whether it's the workplace culture, whether it's what's required of you for job procedures, job steps, or whether, this is the laptop or this is the computer or these are the things that are put in your hands to enable you to do the work, then it's fully acceptable, right? And now we're actually seeing a shift on that regard too. We're actually starting to see a shift on that where once you work for an organization that's actually taken those initiatives and brought you to a place where you didn't think was possible before, and then for some reason you now shift an organization and then you take those steps back, now we're seeing that that's becoming an issue as well, where it's not just like this is how we do things here and then we move forward. Now it's like, well, why are we doing this way? Like, why can't we do it? Why can't we start shifting the ball? So that's been a new phenomenon as of late, I find, with the new technologies that have been introduced into the workforce with the big push that we've had in the past few years. It's I don't know if you've got any feedback on that side.
Well, one of the things that comes to mind for me as you're talking about that is like what's kind of occurred for me in the last kind of month or so is like we make some, I've made some big organizational changes, tried to change the way we do health and safety at Technica, and it's like just in the role, like we went from like a more decentralized model to a centralized model, and things just seem to work. And like I was looking at it from one specific efficiency, and then you move it and you start to see all the things that were intertwined and things just work. And I found even with the technology, like, we said like make some statements like, no, we're not going to use a checklist, but there's a fine balance, and over time it kind of like it just works itself out, and you find what's the optimum might not be the optimum. Like optimum is different. You're thinking about optimum from like an efficiency standpoint, like a cost standpoint, that might be good from a cost standpoint, but it might not be the optimum solution for how the team works and for the rest of making sure that we deliver good quality work and without hurting people. Like it's fascinating. Like I find it fascinating to look at an organization and how it's adaptable and kind of to what you were talking about.
And it's funny how when you start projects, how like you've got all your KPIs aligned, you got everything aligned. You're saying, this is what I'm going to do. This is what the end looks like. And then we've talked about this in previous interviews where it's not a linear path. And then things occur during a project. Well, all of a sudden there's deviation, right? Whether positive or negative. But there's definitely going to be deviation. You can almost assume that it's just an automatic and mechanic way of delivering things, is that there's going to be a deviation from the expectation.
Yep.
But what's really interesting is that, especially when it comes to technology, is that you have a certain intent and you say, this is how we're going to do things moving forward. And then you put it in people's hands, and then they end up telling you how it's actually going to be working. And then they end up making their own paths to success with it. And it creates two different things. It creates two different challenges. One is it challenges you as the manager trying to keep the ball moving forward in a straight pattern. It challenges you to reconsider that maybe your idea or the group that was developing the idea was slightly skewed because of the roles you're in. And it also challenges you in a sense where it's, okay, hold on. If we don't try to mitigate those creative balances without disrupting them, without like shutting them down completely, then the intent will be completely different than what we've actually anticipated. And sometimes it's a good thing and sometimes it's a bad thing. But like, what would you say that we would, if you talk to the audience right now and we say like, this is what we recommend to anticipate, like if we're saying that the project might end up being as a complete product might be completely different than when you envisioned when we started, how do you measure success with that?
Employee engagement. Like you talked about it, and one of the interesting one was like one of the things we do at Technica is we have a superintendent's log. So the superintendent writes out a bunch of notes for the supervisor, kind of expectations for the week. And as we were rolling out Sophie to the supervisors, to the superintendents, never got around to defining this is exactly the process for the superintendent's log, because we had never done it before. Everybody had their own thing. And then we just assumed people would use it a certain way. And then, use like, I think it was the daily log form. And some people were using the lineup tool, and it really showed people's like creativity. And it was really, really cool. So I think it'd be, the more you resist, it will persist. So if I said no and keep pushing back, it'll keep coming back. But if I'm open to it, I think if, to your point, like that's what we need to do, is be open and be willing to accept it. And the end goal isn't going to look exactly like you imagine it. At least in my experience and what we've done so far, it hasn't. I think it's far super, exceeded expectations as far as what I had seen and thought. But that's the one thing, is just like, be open to it. To your point, kind of sometimes there's boundaries required, and that's been really good. But it's been more of like, we focused on the intent sometimes. Like we go back and like, okay, well, what's the intent? Okay, yeah, we're meeting the intent. Okay, we're good. Like keep going. And then we'd share it to everybody else. And then we even had meetings, like alignment meetings between the different work groups, where we said, okay, this is how we're doing it all over the place. In order to be consistent so that it works for all the different projects, we have people that move around. How do you guys want to do it moving forward? And everybody just decided this is the way we want to do it, and we move forward with it. So it's been really, really fun.
The interesting part, like I always look back at especially in the mining world, like I look back at the miners ranch all the time, because that was the most fascinating tool for me as I was getting myself used to working underground and then learning the different roles and adapting and things like that. Like a company might say, well, that whatever $35, $40, $50, whatever it costs for that ranch, like, if I have to supply this to every worker, my goodness, the ROI is hard to explain on having to supply these ranches for everybody. Like that's expensive. Like, why do I need to spend that? And when I was thinking about that, I said, well, if you look at the original intent of why you were giving that tool on their belt, and it was, basically to be able to get access to water and air as you need. And if there's a handle that's broken, it's not in your way. So at least for safety purposes, they've got something there to help them out.
It was the jack leg and the stopper to keep the nuts tight and verify that.
Things like that, right? And then when you look at the actual use, where people really got creative, where all of a sudden it's a measuring tool, it's an anchor to measure depths, it's you tie it to a string to be able to draw a string line and then put that in place, or you use it as a pry bar sometimes to just kind of like unwedge certain things. You use it. I mean, there's probably 150 different ways that I saw a miner's wrench being used, or a crescent wrench. And then started thinking, if somebody actually did an analysis on ROI from that investment, they would realize that it's actually not even close to compared, like the cost is nowhere compared to the actual productivity that the workforce is gaining and earning from just having that simple tool on their belt. And I don't think that anybody anticipated that when they made those decisions. So, that's one of the things that I consider sometimes when we talk about budgets and we talk about the cost and the return, and if we invest X amount, what is it that we're going to gain from it? And sometimes the short-sighted view will say, like, it's $1 million investment. We're getting like a $75,000 return a month, the kind of thing. And it takes a long time to get your return on your investment. But then when you really dive in on, well, that's true for 50 people or 100 people. But then if we're 500 people or 5,000 people, now that's a moving target and it's a moving metric, right? So it becomes a very interesting conversation when you start analyzing which technology you want to introduce into your workplace or into your organization, and what the actual ROI is. It's a complete moving target. So, I mean, what would you say as far as like if somebody was to sell you a new technology today, and you say, like, this technology will enable you to do X, and then X will save you X dollars, how would you say that you would dive in and say, is this the only way that we're going to save dollars? Like, how do we evaluate that now properly?
I haven't even got there in my thinking. That's an interesting point of view. Like, I try to, like, I guess where I'm looking at is like, what is the problem I'm trying to solve? And I'm not even considering like the side effects maybe. like I think of them from the negative side, like try to like, what is this going to impact the wrong way? Like that's going to add cost to it. But I've never looked at it from the perspective of like, what are some of the unintended consequences on the positive side that will, generate some additional return.
Right. Right. And I mean, to come back to like, even just, how you introduced the technology for Sophie in the field, and how it's actually made things, like we focused a lot on making things better for the worker, but then all of a sudden we're seeing the efficiencies from the project coordinator standpoint. We're seeing efficiencies from the supervisor. We're seeing efficiencies from the project manager. And those are all byproducts of just having information available. So it's that's an interesting conversation. And I think as we have guests come on the show in the next month, I think that would be an important one to ask, where, how do you actually nail down the true ROI for your initiatives when you don't even know what you don't know?
Yeah.
Right. You know that it's a sound investment and there's a possibility that it can go in the right way. But then there's all the unknowns as far as like, once you unleash that tool and you get people's creativity to kick in, there's a potential for greatness. And I think that's where the conversation is going to steer in a really positive direction for everybody. Right on. Well, hey, Eric, show up episode number 1. Here we are. It's done. We're here now. Now we get to plan number 2.
We're a little all over the map, but I think we promised that off the start. So hopefully you guys found it entertaining.
Right on. So for everybody following, hey, don't forget, like, subscribe, comment, all those, all those great social media tools to help the movement move forward. And any feedback you want to offer, please go ahead and put a comment on where you see this video. We'll be glad to connect with you and offer some input and even have those questions brought on air so we can answer them for you. Looking forward for episode number 2, which is next month. So stay tuned, and we'll catch you next time on Change Itself.
Right on. Thank you.